Hello, everyone. So, with the hurricane, we're going to go on a bit of a different schedule. This is a episode I previously recorded with Bethanie from princekaifanpod. It is about Pride and Premeditation, which is a Pride and Prejudice retelling. I think you all will enjoy, and hopefully next week we will be back with our regularly scheduled content. But without further ado, this is a previously recorded Patreon episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Barely Bookish podcast over on Patreon. Today, we are talking about Pride and Premeditation with Bethanie from the Prince Kai Fan Pod podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I say that like we met at like a coffee shop. You know what I mean? Like,
I do have coffee, so it's a virtual coffee meetup. I would love it if it was like at a coffee shop. That would be fun.
oh my gosh, yeah. And then you have like the good aesthetic like background noise of like
Yes.
people like quietly talking and like
As
coffee being
opposed to
made.
like sometimes when I record and the background noise is my husband playing video games and
Yeah, sometimes my background noise is a moon like trying to get on top of like the desk behind me and then like missing, and then so it's just like slam 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 slam.
very often in my show notes I'll just put like special guest appearance by Scamp Finger because he talks so much. And so
Yeah.
randomly you'll just hear him like grumbling in the background.
Oh. Yeah, I got a couple of recordings where you could just hear Moon calling me from the hallway because she gets mad when she leaves the room and I don't go with her. But
Oh,
I'm like, then don't leave the room. Just hang out in here with me.
Scamp just gets mad when you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Like,
Mm,
if he thinks it's time for bed and you're still awake, then he's mad at
mm.
you.
That's
You
fair.
know? If he thinks that it's time to play and you're like watching TV or reading a book, he's mad at
Mhm.
you. If
Oh.
uh if he thinks that it's time for dinner and you're not feeding him, he's mad at you. If you won't let him bark out the window, he's mad at you. Like he's very bossy and he likes
Mhm.
things his way. And when he doesn't get his way, he's like he will pout. He will straight
Oh.
up pout. He will be like, "No, don't pet me. I'm mad at you." He'll like sulk in the corner. You like throw a toy and he just like deadpans at you like, "I'm not playing. I'm mad at you."
Oh.
Yeah,
That's so cute.
it's like heartbreaking though, because then I'm like, I'm trying to record, and he's like, play with me, and I'm like, oh great, now I'm a bad mom. Thanks.
Yeah, Moon's been like, we have people over, and she's getting to this point where like she's like, oh, people, 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 and she like gets so excited and like hangs out and zooms around, and then moments after they leave, she sleeps for like 4 hours on the couch. She's like, I'm so exhausted.
I love
So,
when animals get exhausted for no reason. I'm like,
mhm,
Beowulf goes to bed. Beowulf's our other dog, and he goes to bed every night at 8:30. Every night, like clockwork. 8:15 rolls around. He wants to go outside. He comes
mhm.
inside. He gets a bite. He gets a drink. He like comes to everyone, and then he'll go to Scamp and try to get like a like some attention from Scamp. Then he goes
Mhm.
to our room. He kicks my pillow into the middle of the bed, and he goes to sleep. Every night, like clockwork. This
Oh,
is his routine. And I'm
that's so
like,
funny.
you haven't done anything all day. All day you've been sleeping. You have been asleep all day. At 8:15, you're like, time for bed.
Yeah,
Like
really worn out.
you woke up like 3 times to get food and go outside, and you're like, ugh, long day. Can't wait to lay in bed now.
That's Moon. She just like all day she sleeps. She gets like an hour of zoomies in between naps, and then
Yes, the
she's like, "All
zoomies.
right." She's like, "Good enough for me."
So they get dinner. They have kibble like 24/7. They can get kibble, but they get chicken and vegetables twice a day, and they
Mhm.
get dinner at 5 p.m. So from like 5:30 to 6, they have the zoomies, and then they go right back to laying down. Like they'll
That's
give me
funny.
a good half hour, and then they're like, "Mom, we're old now. We don't do this anymore. Go find something to do."
Yeah, for her, it's like it depends what she gets. So if I give her her like kitten kibble,
hmm
then she's like, cool, cool. But if I give her a pate dinner, she's like, oh, I'm real stuffed now. I
The
need to
good
take a little
stuff.
nap. I think it's so cute though.
Speaking of good stuff, this
Hmm.
book so
Yes,
good.
I'm so obsessed.
So today we're talking about Pride and Premeditation by Terza
Mhm.
Price, which is a Pride and Prejudice murder mystery retelling, and it is phenomenal.
Mhm. My first thing I have to say is I like the way they this author didn't she like they hit the main things, but they didn't feel the need to go and hit every single thing. Like
Mhm.
Collins didn't have to marry Charlotte, you know. Wickham didn't have to take Lydia away. But there was enough of it getting close enough that it was obviously a Pride and Prejudice retelling.
Retelling. I also
Yeah.
like that it was modernized in terms of like what language style was used and
Mhm.
sentence structure. I think that makes it like easier to digest for today's readers and today's audience. And I think that today's readers and audience, we want to see more strong, independent women.
Mhm.
But that wasn't common way back in the day, not because there weren't strong, independent women, but because society didn't allow them to have a voice. And so, getting this perspective where it's not quite in the 18th century, it's a little bit further in years, and you get to see like sort of a different side to these characters. Like
Mhm.
in the original Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth was kind of a social pariah because she spoke her mind, and women were not supposed to do that. They weren't supposed
Mhm.
to talk at all, let alone give their opinions all the time. And in this retelling, it's kind of similar, but also she wants to work, she wants to practice law, she
Mhm.
wants to participate and have an activity outside of the home, and that's also what makes her um, outside of the normal society. She's not
Mhm.
accepted.
Yeah. It was just so good.
I know.
So good. And okay, I honestly wasn't sure. I don't know how they're going to carry on the next one. And I know you got an arc, so you read a little bit. But I was like, are we going to fully forget everybody in this and then move on?
It's just a
Okay.
completely different story. Yeah. It's kinda like, because the original Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility, they're 2 independent novels that don't
Hmm.
have a connection to each other.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's kind of similar, the
Okay.
retellings are not they don't necessarily, take place. I guess they're companion novels because they're both retellings from the same author,
Hmm.
um, and from inspirations of the same author. They're both Jane Austen. Um,
Hmm.
so in that sense, I would consider it like a series. But
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of like the characters or the plot structure or anything like that, no one makes a return as far as I know. I'm only about 18% of the way in, but
Hmm.
so far none of that has been present.
Okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure. So that's good to know.
Yeah, I kind of like it that way though, because
Mhm.
like we said, the originals didn't have that connection. So it
Yeah.
would have felt very forced, I think.
Hmm.
Because also those characters, just because they're from the same area and the same time, doesn't mean they belong in the same world.
Hmm.
And I don't necessarily think that like Jane and Marianne and Eleanor, I don't necessarily think that they could all be in the same story together and have the same
Yeah.
interactions. Like I don't think they belong in the same story.
I was worried it was if they were, then it was going to kind of make them all background characters and still be like a Lizzie Bennett story a bit.
Yeah, and I think that Sense and Sensibility, the original writing,
Hmm.
was a little less uh, main character centered. Like if you read Pride and Prejudice, it's very clear that the main character is Elizabeth Bennet.
Hmm.
But if you read Sense and Sensibility, it kind of goes back and forth between Marianne and Eleanor. So they both kind of feel like the main characters.
Hmm.
Maybe Eleanor a little bit more than Marianne, but it's almost like every other chapter in the original Sense and Sensibility. It's like this is Marianne's perspective, this is Eleanor's perspective, even though it's all written in third person.
Hmm.
So in that sense, this book has like more. This book that we're talking about today, Pride and Premeditation, has more of a central focus because
Hmm.
everyone else is a background character, including Darcy, because this
Yeah.
is Elizabeth's story.
Hmm. Yeah. And I really liked the way this was done. It was just amazing.
It's
Like,
beautiful.
I'm so excited for the next book. Because
I really hope that you get a copy, but it does come out in 3 months, I think. So
worst
I
comes
guess
to
I
worst, I'm just
should
gonna get
check
it
the
then.
date real quick.
Hmm.
Um, Sense and Second Degree Murder comes out April 5th, 2022. So
Excellent. Yeah, worst comes to worst, I'll read it then. But if I can get a review copy,
it's
that'd
really
be
good.
so
I hope
good.
that you do get a review copy, and if not, things happen, but it's definitely good. Then definitely worth picking up, as was this one. My
Hmm.
mom really only reads two types of books. She likes classic literature and she likes murder mystery. So I really need to
Perfect.
get her a copy of this book. She's not
Yeah.
big on young adult, but
I think this like is a good it, like hits both though. Like this is a perfect combination. So
yeah, and I think that like we said, this the way that she modernized some of the sentence structure and the language
mhm.
used to appeal to a younger audience, I think was perfect.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So basically, the premise of this is that everyone is working at a law firm, and then in this, Collins is her dad's younger partner and takes credit for all of Lizzie's work, which is not surprising at all. And he's supposed to inherit the business,
Hmm.
essentially. Um, Mrs. Bennett does not want her to work there at all. Really, just wants her to be like a
Get
quote
a
proper
husband.
lady. Yep,
Well,
get
we
a husband.
could, I guess I could read the insert real quick, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, get my reader voice on. Pride and Prejudice gets a murder mystery makeover in this new series based on Jane Austen's most beloved books. When a scandalous murder shocks London high society, 16-year-old law enthusiast Lizzie Bennet sees the perfect opportunity to prove herself as a formidable litigator, despite the fact that women are only allowed in court as witnesses. Unfortunately for Lizzie, the man accused of the crime already has a fledgling lawyer, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, the stern young heir training to take over the prestigious firm Pemberley and Associates. Convinced the authorities have blamed the wrong person, Lizzie vows to steal Darcy's client and solve the murder so that she can earn a position of her own. But as the case and her feelings for Darcy become more complicated, Lizzie discovers that her dream job could make her happy, but it might also get her killed. Irresistibly romantic and clever, Pride and Prejudice is Tirzah Price's first novel and a magical one. I
So
forgot
good.
that she's 16. That's another change because in the original she's 21.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
I also kind of forgot she's 16.
I completely like spaced on that. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so good, you guys. Should
Yes.
we do a spoiler warning?
Yeah, honestly, all of my episodes are spoilers, but
Yeah, let's do
little.
yeah, let's do a spoiler warning right now
Yeah.
for my Patreon people. If you're listening and you don't want to get spoiled, please stop, go read Pride and Premeditation, or
Hmm.
listen to the audiobook, and then come back and join us. Or if you don't care about spoilers, then hey, what's up? Listen.
Yeah, continue on. Oh my goodness. Okay. Honestly, I just feel like we should start. Do you want to start at the beginning or do you want to start at the end?
I mean, both are amazing.
I know. I feel like I'm going to start at the end because I literally finished it right this morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I was like, I was doing good, doing good. And then I had a recording of the Aeneid last night or yesterday afternoon. And I was like, oh, I'll finish. But I only have like 10 pages left.
Yeah.
So I just
It's
woke up at 8.
well, let's talk about the end then.
Okay. Oh, okay. First off, Darcy not proposing. I was kind of shocked, but
I
like,
was relieved.
I mean, yeah, I was like, oh, they're gonna, I was waiting, and then it's like Finn, and I was like, okay, but it's like, it's not like I was mad about the change because I feel like it made sense, you
I
know?
feel like this particular story was about Lizzie finding her footing as a litigator, and
Hmm.
she just happened to fall for Darcy in the process. So
Yeah.
the ending needed to be her achieving the goal of
Hmm.
becoming a litigator, not her getting a husband. I
Yeah.
think I think that's why she chose that ending, and I think that's why I like that ending so much, because if
Hmm.
they had gotten engaged, I probably would have been like, "Well, that's great, but, you know, I'm really happy that they got engaged, but I'm still trying to celebrate the fact that she's getting taken seriously as a litigator now."
Yeah. I think it would have taken too much focus away, like you kind of said, and I think it would have just like brought Darcy like really abruptly, yeah, into the story. You ever say a word and you're like, that doesn't sound like right.
I do that sometimes. Um, and I always am like, is that a word? Who cares? You guys know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with my husband. My husband and I do it all the time. And usually it's him and he tries to keep talking. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. The other day he was trying to say, he couldn't decide if he wanted to say wonderful or lovely. And
Mm-hmm.
so whatever came out of his mouth, it was like Woverly, and he tried to keep talking, and I was like, "You're just
No,
gonna
no.
try and slide past that?" And he's like, "I didn't know which one to say," and I was like, "Was it between wonderful and lovely?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then like 2 days ago, something happened, and I was like, "It was Woverly." So it's just in our house,
Oh,
it's a word now.
I love that. It's so funny.
But he
I
does kind of. I think that you're right. I think that it's kind of abrupt, and I think that it's kind of maybe we as the reader anticipate it because we've read Pride and Prejudice before, so
mhm,
we know he's going to make an appearance, but also we have to take into mind that there might be people who are reading this that haven't read the original and don't really care about the original.
mhm,
They just think the premise of this is good. And I think what makes this so great as a retelling is that you don't need to know anything about the original story at all
mhm.
to enjoy this one. It stands perfectly on its own.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of retellings where it's like if you didn't read the source material, you're gonna be like really confused on why things are happening.
Right.
You
Right.
know, like if you start like if you did what's that called? Is it Bridget Jones
Yeah.
where she gets put back in time?
No.
What's the one where she gets put back in time?
Bridget Jones is a Pride and Prejudice retelling for the
Hmm.
modern era. With
Yes.
Renee Zellweger and Colin Firth and Hugh Grant.
Which one? Oh man. What's that one called? It's like BBC. I literally did a Patreon episode on it.
Did you? And
Yeah,
it's
hold on.
Pride and Prejudice, and they go back in time.
Yeah, one second. I can tell you right now. I have my Patreon and then another tab. Hold on. Uh Published. Lost in Austin.
Oh,
That's what
I
it
haven't
is.
read that one. Or no, is that a
It's a
movie?
movie.
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that one. I was also gonna say like there are some where if you haven't read the source material, uh, you're gonna be very confused by a lot of the content that's
Mhm.
in the books, like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies,
Mhm.
or um, Death Comes to Pemberley, which is technically a continuation, but it's the type of book where it should have stood alone based on like the premise and the content, and it didn't. I think there
Mhm.
was a lot of exposition missing, so that if you hadn't read
Mhm.
Pride and Prejudice, you wouldn't understand the story.
Mhm.
Um, but I think what works for this story is that if you haven't read Pride and Prejudice, it's 100% enjoyable.
Mhm.
It's completely stands on its own, and you're not missing any information or content or even like a theme or feeling when you're reading the book. But if you have read Pride and Prejudice, you get to
Mhm.
see all of those little nuances as you travel through the story, and I think that's what makes it special.
Yeah, for sure. I really like everything about this novel. Like there's not something I don't like, really.
It's like the opposite of our Pride and Prejudice and Mistletoe.
Yeah. We're like
Where I was
we're
like,
like
there's
it's
got to be
okay.
something we like about this. Which I'm sorry, but I still am not a huge fan of that book
It's
um,
fair.
or movie. But I do love this one. Let's talk about some of the characters that they
Mhm.
decided that Terza decided to, I don't know, include in different ways. For starters, Charlotte works at
Mhm.
her father's law firm as a secretary, and Colin is kind of a creep.
Yeah.
He like
Collins is big creepy.
he flirts with Charlotte while she's working all the time,
Mhm.
and is like very inappropriate with her, and then like randomly proposes to Elizabeth out of nowhere. Well, not out of nowhere. He basically is like, "Look, you want to be a lawyer? That's
Mhm.
adorable. I think it's super cute. Your dad wants to give me his firm because I'm
Mhm.
amazing. And so, yeah, the best thing we could do is get married. And she's like, why would we get married? He's like,
Yeah.
what did I just say?
Yeah, he's like,
Everything I
listen,
just said. That's why we should get married. Like,
right?
but
He's like, you want to be a lawyer? I am a lawyer. Therefore, you no
it's
longer
close
have to be.
enough. I love the changes to the characters. I feel like Collins is such a um not a creep in the original Pride and Prejudice, but just kind of uh, annoying, you know.
Hmm.
He's the exact opposite of Darcy. He's boring and overly social but has no actual understanding of social cues or
Hmm.
how to behave in public, and he's like almost cringy with his mannerisms and behaviors. And in this retelling, I think he's cringy, but in different ways.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I feel like in the original, he's like, to me, he's a tiny bit creepy, but like of the time where he's still like really proper, but you can tell that like he's just all about himself. But like it's not to the level where this one is, where it's like you feel like you would have to go to HR about him. Like,
Definitely need to go to HR. Definitely need to report that. Yeah, I would say he's a very self-serving character in both
mhm.
stories, but I agree that in the original Pride and Prejudice, I'm not worried for like my safety necessarily.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, I think he's more of like a sexual predator than
Hmm.
anything else.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just, ugh.
I don't
He's
necessarily think it's aggressive. Like I wouldn't, I wouldn't call the cops, but like you said, you would report that to human resources.
he feels like that guy that like when you're walking through the office, he like lays his hand on your back for a little too long, and you're like, ugh.
Like, I didn't invite you to do that.
And you're like, I will call the police right now. Please step
Right,
away.
right. Like the kind of guy where you're like standing on a ladder and he's like, "Let me help you with that." And it's like, "I don't think so."
Yeah,
Um,
no.
yeah. Let's talk about the sisters. What did you think of the way that she included all of the siblings in this one?
I kind of like that it's like we didn't get like super in depth with any of them. We get like, Kitty and Lydia being basically the same person again,
Yeah.
with them just being like obsessed with who's calling. And then I like the line where like she said something about Mary wanting to comfort her sisters by like reading them Bible scriptures.
I love that Kitty and Lydia in this book are like completely interchangeable. And in Pride and
Hmm.
Prejudice, I feel like Lydia's the leader and Kitty's the follower. But I
Hmm.
feel like in this book, like they're 100% interchangeable. And like you said, we don't have the like Lydia Wickham um like scary ending that we get in the original Pride and Prejudice,
Hmm.
and I think that is good for this story. I think it would take away from the story if we were also focused on that in
Yeah.
addition to everything else that we're dealing with Wickham.
Yeah, for sure. But I do like that she like nodded to it by having Wickham flirt with her when he was supposed
Mhm.
to be calling on Lizzie. Like, I like that anything she changed, like this author changed, is they still like nodded to it a
I
bit.
like that. Yeah, she was like, "Look, I get that this was in the original, so here you go." Like instead of
Mhm.
having the two of them flirt and then run away together and then have this like scandalous elopement that Darcy had to um not cover up but sort of atone for to
Mhm.
save their reputation and their family's reputation.
Mhm.
And instead it's just like, they flirted for like a second, but the author was like, "But I'm not going to do that to Lydia." And I was like, "Thank you."
Big appreciation because
Lydia has suffered enough.
yeah, like no, it's every Pride and Prejudice retelling. I feel like that comes back up. So I like that it didn't. I guess not in Pride and Prejudice or Mistletoe, but
In the book, it was like this weird twin situation where they were like vandalizing, and she was like,
yeah,
she was like, "I'm going to keep them out of prison." And I'm like, I mean, they're 16, so they're going to juvie, but they cost thousands of dollars in damages and you paid
yeah.
for it. That's not helping anybody.
I know.
They're
I'm
not gonna
like,
learn their lesson. All they found out is like, "Oh, if my brother has a nice girlfriend, then we can do even more damage."
yeah. But it's like even usually you don't have to go to real juvie for vandalization. You
Right.
usually like pay a fine and do community you something. You know? Like
No,
that probably
in
would have
this
taught them a
one
lesson.
yeah, and I think also in this one, I like that Mary and Kitty and Lydia are very side characters.
Mhm.
They don't necessarily have any growth of their own, but they
Mhm.
also don't really have any stories of their own. They're just there. They're part of the world building, they're part of her life, but they're
Mhm.
not part of this story.
Yeah, for sure. I really like that too because honestly, I'm gonna keep comparing this to other Pride and Prejudice books I've read, but like they focus so much on the family dynamic where I'm
Mhm.
like, this is not really our main concern
Right,
usually.
and the family dynamic at the time that Austen wrote the book
Hmm.
uh, was an extremely crucial part of society and their life. And so much so that if one sister, if you had a fallen sister, as they said, it would ruin every other sister. It would ruin the entire family's reputation. And all the other sisters might not even get married just because
Hmm.
the person wouldn't want to be associated with that family. Whereas now, or even when this book was said to have taken place,
Hmm.
you'd feel bad for the family and the girl, but you wouldn't be like, well, I can't date Elizabeth because one of her sisters had issues.
Hmm.
And I feel like because of that, it retellings do a better job if they stay away from the family dynamic, especially if they're not going to explore it
Yeah,
100%.
yeah, for sure. It's so good. I did like Mrs. Bennet though,
I
in
love Mrs.
this.
Bennet.
So funny.
I love
Like,
how she's constantly like, ugh, are you working again? Can't
hmm
you work on getting a husband instead of working on some stupid law case?
such like so she's so quick with it too. Like her comebacks and like are very good in this. Like when Lizzie goes and tries to like get information out of her mother. Like I feel like a lot of times they try and make Mrs. Bennet look stupid the whole time.
She's there for like comic relief.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it's like she's still like smart. She still kind of knows what's going on with her kids, even
Yeah.
if she is like a comic relief character. And I like that this one explored that a little bit.
It's kind of like what they said in the 2005 Pride and Prejudice where she was like, when you have five daughters who need to get married, tell me what will occupy your thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
because that's her job.
Yeah.
Her job as their mother is to get them married so they can have a nice husband and a nice home and somewhere to live, because
Mm-hmm.
if dad dies, they have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, she had five daughters. That's five daughters that she has to find a future for. Yeah, that occupy
Mm-hmm.
my thoughts too. And I think
Yeah.
that because of that, she's very observant and very involved in their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like like you said, she's often played as dumb or comic relief or even like a joke of a person like, "Oh, she only cares about marriage." But that was important at that
Mm-hmm.
time. And it wasn't her being like this shallow person who only cared about marriage. That's what was important. That's how she was going to take care of her kids,
Mm-hmm. For sure.
which we actually do see in Sense and Sensibility. Okay, spoiler alert if you haven't read Sense and Sensibility, kind of skip 5 minutes ahead, but
Mm-hmm.
we see that in Sense and Sensibility. Their father dies unexpectedly and they're
Mm-hmm.
left with nothing because they're women. So his house, his business, his finances, his investments, it all goes to
Mm-hmm.
their estranged half brother. And he basically is like, look, I'll give you each like $500.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, like per month or year? Or he's like, no, 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 no. You just each get $500 and then I never want to see you again.
Literally.
And they like pull their money together and they're like, okay, well, we found this like 2-bedroom cottage. And then they get there and it's like, cottage is a stretch. 2 bedrooms is also a stretch. This is more
Yep.
like a bedroom and a giant closet, but still not big enough to be a bedroom. And then it's like, all of these, you've got like 3 women sharing a bed because they don't have anywhere else to live. And
Mm-hmm.
all of this is because they're women and they weren't married when their father died. And so can you imagine being Mrs. Bennett and you have to worry about 5 of these girls? You have to
Mm-hmm.
worry about making sure that 5 of these girls get married. All 5 of them have to get married before their father dies because otherwise they're destitute and they have nowhere to live and they have no money.
Yeah.
I'd be pretty worried too.
Especially when your life is in the hands of Collins, of all people.
Oh my goodness, right? And then Lizzie refuses to marry him.
Yeah.
And it's
I'd
no
be panicked.
wonder, and again it's played off as like you just threw away our entire family's opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
You just ruined your sister's lives because now I definitely have to get them married.
Yeah.
Before I might have had a couple extra years. Kitty's only 15 and I still have to focus on it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the books it's kind of played off as like Mrs. Bennet doesn't care about Lizzie's happiness or Mrs. Bennet doesn't care about Lizzie's independence. She wants to force this marriage on her and it's like it's from a completely different time.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I mean, honestly, thinking about it that way, it totally makes sense. And I
Leaving
think
me
a
on
lot
in
of
my 20-minute tangent way.
no, I like it. It's fine. It works because then it's like it does make you think about it because you're like, yeah, no, I can definitely see why she'd be that way. And I like nuanced retellings where they focus that in a different way. You
Yeah,
know.
because like like we said, the original Pride and Prejudice, what made Lizzie so ahead of her time, what made her such a feminist, what made her such an outcast in her society was that she spoke her mind
Hmm.
and she was hesitant to get married.
Hmm.
Whereas at that time, a woman of her age, her only job was to keep her mouth shut and get married.
Hmm.
Turning down any proposal, but let alone two, I mean, that's unheard of. It's almost shameful. And
Yeah.
so in this book, instead of it being that she doesn't want to get married, like the reason that she's kind of pushing against the norm of society is because she wants a job and not just any job. She wants a job that's only meant for men.
Hmm. It's so good. I'm just gonna keep saying it because it's
Cause it's good. It's
uh-huh.
really good. And I really love the characters that they included in this. I
Hmm.
absolutely love Darcy. Oh
Yes.
my gosh.
So like I
Good.
love Darcy so much. He like the way he was portrayed in this, it's like, yeah, he was prideful, but like he didn't really make jabs about her family at all in
No.
this. And he didn't like he was more concerned about his standing in business than like making digs at her for being a woman in business,
Right. I think
which I
also
liked.
what was great is one, he didn't really care that she was a woman in business. He
Hmm.
just cared that she was in the business. Like he didn't see her as like a woman who's his competition. He was just like, "Why are you my competition?" It had nothing to do with her
Hmm.
gender.
Yeah.
And then two, I love the reveal at the end where we find out that like he's just as vulnerable as she is
Hmm.
in this career field because he's got his father's name to live up to.
Hmm.
And so far he hasn't been able to do so.
I know. I liked this like because it could have been so easy to make his pridefulness like mansplaining
Hmm.
or like all about gender and
Which
the
would have
way
been really hard to come back from.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he could have been like, "Oh, he grew and now he knows," and like I feel like I would have hated Darcy, and I'm glad that we did not make that the focus.
Yeah, I would hate to hate Darcy.
Me too. Speaking of
I think it
Darcy,
would be hard to come back from that. It would be hard as a reader to
mhm,
listen to him mansplain for like 200 pages and then forgive him. That
I
wouldn't
know.
there'd be too many readers that would be like, "Well, I'm never touching a book by her again."
Yeah, for sure. And I will say, if you listen to my Sense and Sensibility episodes, my cousin Allison just got a puppy and named him Fitzwilliam.
Mm.
Oh, I love that Bingley and Jane met at the hearing. Like that was so good for me. I love that so much.
I love that. I love the connection of Bingley being like, the accused,
Yeah.
and his best friend is a litigator. And yet
Mhm.
Lizzie is still running in there like, I'm going to represent you. And he's like, no, it's cool. Like, my bestie's a lawyer. And she's like,
Mhm.
but I'm trying to be a lawyer. And he's like,
Yeah.
well, that's cute, but he is an actual lawyer. Like, again,
Mhm.
it has nothing to do with her being a woman, though. It's just that
Yeah.
she's grotesquely underqualified. She has no
Mhm.
education. She has no references. As far as they know, she has no job experience at all, and she
Mhm.
has no casework to or character references that could say like she's great at this, she's great at that. And she's just walking up and she's like, my dad is a lawyer and I want to be one too. And you're accused of murder, one of the biggest things you could be accused of. And
Mhm.
instead of going with your bestie who works for this prestigious law firm, you should go with the daughter of this lawyer you've never heard of who's like barely making ends meet.
Yep. And I do like too that it's like not only that, but it's like in order for her to have this meeting, she lied about who she was too. So he's like, what? And it's
Didn't
like,
she say she was his sister or something?
yeah,
Yeah. He's like, "You're not my sister." And she's like, "Well spotted."
yeah. She's like, huh, yeah, I'm not. So nice.
I love the nod to her purse. I love that she's like
Mhm.
always carrying her receptacle. And that they're like talking, they're always like, "What do you have in that thing? Why do you
Yeah.
always carry that bag? What do you have in there?" And she's always like pulling out. It's like the bag from Mary Poppins where she's just like
Hmm.
randomly pulls stuff out and they're like, "What else do you have in there? Let me like take a peek and see what's going on."
She's like the murder weapon. I love the tampering of evidence because it's like apparently like late 1800s, early 1900s or something, where they're just like, oh yeah, I found this at the crime scene, this button, and
Have
everyone's
you
like, oh
seen
yeah.
have you seen John Mulaney? He's a comedian.
Hmm.
And he's hysterical and he has a skit about how easy it was to get away with murder before it was like before there
Yeah.
was DNA. He was like, what did they even do? They just like walked up to the crime scene and they were like, this blood is gross. All right, what's my hunch? Because there was nothing to go on. You couldn't fingerprint, you couldn't look at
Hmm.
DNA. They didn't take enough care for the evidence at all. They were just like touching everything and moving
Hmm.
stuff around. And I love how present it is in this one, or it's like as long as you oh, he says like as long as you weren't still at the murder when the cops got there,
Yeah.
you were gonna get away with it.
Yep. And he has like this line too where he's like, go tell them it was
Oh yeah,
something.
the bank robberies. He's like, you
Yeah.
go tell them it was John and Snow and Sunny and the gang. And well, you know what? For my Patreon people, I will insert clips of all of that because you guys know that I love to insert clips. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just hilarious, like what people could have gotten away with before there was such thing as DNA or evidence or any of that. And I love that Lizzie like cares about that stuff and is like,
Mhm.
well, that's evidence. And they're like, Eva, what? What are you talking about? And I love that she's constantly like playing detective, even though she's supposed to be a
Mhm.
lawyer. She's like, well, I have to do both, obviously. Obviously, the cops aren't going to do both. I have to do both jobs.
I know. She should have been a cop, like become
She would
a
have been a great
detective.
detective. She could fit in on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I want to talk about Lady Catherine.
Yes. I
Bitch
was so
gets such an
surprised.
upgrade in this story. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. This is where she really went a different direction.
Mhm.
This is where she veers, I think, the most from the original and from every other retelling.
I know, and I love it so much because it's like Lady Catherine is such a throwaway character in the original, kind of. Whereas like
Mhm.
she
She just shows
matters.
up a couple of times,
Yeah.
stirs the pot, you know, rattles things up, and then goes home to her empty house.
Hmm. But like for her to be the main villain of this
Sorry, I was
is
just petting
so
my dog and he's like asleep and he just kicked my hand and it like scared me.
oh,
I'm sorry.
that's fine.
Lady Catherine, the bitch. Um
Yeah, I really think that like having her as the main villain is such a good change because it's like everyone's really connected through her, but she doesn't do anything.
yeah. Well,
But
and in this one, I was because I know it's a retelling. I was waiting for the reveal that she was his aunt.
I know, me too.
And so when that didn't come, I was like, so does that mean he's the bad guy? Like, are they connected in that way? And I was like, no, she's the bad guy. And she's not connected to the story in any other way other than she be bad, yo.
Yeah. But I do like those that they made a powerful woman baddie.
Uh-huh.
Like,
I love that. And I love that she's cool with being a baddie, but she's also like, she comes up to Lizzie and she's like, I love strong, powerful women.
mhm.
You are a strong, powerful woman. Let's do this together. Let's be besties. I
Yeah.
got you, you got me. We could be super successful. And Lizzie's like,
Mhm.
yeah, but like, I want to follow the law. And Catherine is basically like, you're so naive.
Yeah, Catherine's like, ew, boring. Okay, never mind.
She's like, oh, that's adorable. You don't want to break the law. Talk to me in 20 years, girl.
Which like respect it because like in this it's like it sounded like Lady Catherine's previous husband wasn't a huge deal. Like they're like, yeah, he was a knight, but like so I feel like
Almost
it
like he
kind of
was a joke.
what?
Almost like he was a joke in their
Yeah.
society. Yeah.
I also kind of feel like maybe that implied that he didn't leave her with any money. And it's like she's probably at that age where it's like you can't really marry again, you
Yeah.
can't really do
Well,
anything.
who are you
So,
going to marry? Who's available at that age?
yeah.
Divorce wasn't common. So what are you're going to find another widower?
Mhm.
Yeah. And I also feel like it's obviously not explained, but like I love to make headcanons for what happens to people.
Mhm.
Like I have this whole headcanon for Torin that like he was in love and had this beautiful fiance and she died of the plague and that's why he like dedicates his life to serving the emperor. So yeah, I told Marissa about that and she was like, what? I was like, I don't know, I just wanted a backstory for Torin, and I know he's
Mhm.
married to his work, but I wanted him to have like some kind of love. So I was like,
Yeah.
ooh, tragedy. Um, so for me, Lady Catherine, I kind of feel like Lady Catherine is one of those like really sad stories. Like she thought she had this wonderful life of luxury and happiness, and then her husband dies, and it turns out they're poor, destitute, and they owe lots of people lots of money, and
Mhm.
no one liked her husband. He was basically a joke or a crook, and she's got nothing. She has no money, no home, and nothing but his last name.
Yep.
And so I like to think that like that happened to her and she was like, "You know what? I don't need to have his last name. What's important is my first name, and that's what
Mhm.
everybody's going to know me by." And she's the one who's like, "You tell them it was Lady Catherine." You know,
Yeah.
she's proud of what she does. And that
Mhm.
doesn't make her a good guy. I don't want this to sound like I'm like, "Yeah, Lady Catherine's cool, you guys." Um but in this particular context,
Mhm.
Wickham just got a little carried away.
Yeah. Uh and like I do like the idea of like Wickham being an actual bad guy.
Oh, I love it because Wickham is a bad guy.
Mhm.
In
But
the
then
original, they kind of play it off as like this misfortune and misunderstanding. And after he marries Lydia, he comes to Lizzie and he's like, "Well, you're my sister now." And she's like, "And you're my brother. Let's let bygones be bygones." And I'm like, no,
no.
dude was sketch.
Yeah. But I do like the subtle, like her picking up on it in this story. Like
Yeah.
she doesn't give herself credit for it at the end, but like she totally was like keeping things from him because she's like, I don't
I don't want to give
know.
him all the information.
Yeah,
She
and
was
I like
shooketh.
that.
She
Yeah,
was
shooketh.
shooketh.
I
She didn't
know.
trust him, and she was like, "I'm gonna keep some of my bullets a little closer to the chest." And I think that was definitely a good decision on her part. And also part of it was that she didn't want him to be competition. She
Mhm.
was genuinely concerned about giving him the information and then him sort of swooping in at the last minute and being like, "Look, I solved the case. Look at all this work I did." And
Yeah.
it's actually all of her work and all of her hunches and all of her evidence and all of the information that she gathered and the theories that she gathered. And then he's just taking credit for it.
hmm hmm And my favorite part, we had the modern 2005 hand flex, which is they had a little kiss outside the boardroom. And I was like, yes.
That was so great. I also loved the scene where he was like afraid of the dark. She's like,
Yes.
"You're afraid of the dark?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, because people like the dark."
Yeah. And he's like claustrophobic
I
and
thought it was so funny. She was just like, if anything, she was like the one teasing him in that moment. She was like, "So you're afraid of the dark, are you?" And he's like, "Shut up."
literally so good.
So funny.
No, I love it so much. This everything about this book is perfect. I would not change a single thing. So good.
Everything about the sequel that I've read so far is perfect, and I cannot wait for all of these retellings because I know she said she's doing more.
Hmm.
And I feel like she did an episode with Marissa, and I feel like she made a list of all of the ones that she was going to um do, like the name of all of them,
Hmm.
and I can't remember what the names were gonna be.
It's gonna have to start. I'm gonna have to start whittling away on my Jane Austen readings then, because I mean, I bought Emma and
God,
Persuasion.
I love Emma.
Yeah, I talked
Emma
with
is so good.
yeah, I talked with the Wit Beyond Measure podcast, and that we did Clueless. I haven't read Emma yet though, so like I get a basic understanding from like what we discussed on there, but I really want to read it. I'm so excited.
I absolutely love Emma. I can't wait to see what she does with a matchmaker. Um,
Mhm.
God, that's so exciting. I'm looking up. I can't find it now, but I swear the episode she did with Marissa on Happy Writer podcast, I swear she said something about like all the fun names they had come up with.
Mm.
Oh well, I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, so it finds it. Just send it to us.
Yeah. I'm like Googling it and that's not helping me.
I don't think I have anything else to mention.
Just that it's great and everyone
Mhm.
should read it, and check out the sequel when it comes out in April.
Yes.
And she was on Terza Price, the author, was on an episode of Happy Writer podcast with Marissa. So you can go check that out for more information about her as a writer and her process and these books and where her inspiration came from.
Yeah. And read it. Just read it, buy it, love it, enjoy it.
Yes.
Chat about it because I want to talk about it.
What should we say at the end?
Um,
Mm, I always do like a warning on mine.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Be cool, don't do murder.
Yeah. Well, like the Twilight ones that my sister and I have been doing, we say don't get bitten.
Mm.
um, I don't know. Don't let a boy take credit for your work. Don't let anyone take credit for your work. I don't care if
Yeah.
it's a boy or a girl or non-binary. Don't let
Mhm.
anyone take credit for your hard work.
And be a strong, independent woman
Don't
or
mess with the
person.
evidence.
Yeah, stop
Don't
tampering with
mess
the
with
evidence.
evidence. That stuff is important. And
Hmm.
I will insert the clip at the end of this episode of John Mulaney being hilarious for all of my listeners. But
Good.
don't mess with evidence. That stuff is important.
Indeed. Indeed. All
Thank
right. Well, that's all I've got. Thank you
you.
for joining me. I will put all your links in the description of this episode for all my Patreon members who have not listened to the Prince Kai fan pod yet, but definitely should. So please go listen to it because you chat about Marissa Meyer and
And
it's
awesomeness.
delightful. Yeah.
And for my Patreon listeners, I will do the same for Barely Bookish Podcast, where you can find all of your favorite classic literature uh, stories come to life and reimagined. And yeah, until next time, don't mess with evidence. That's what
Yeah.
I got for you.
Sounds good. We'll catch y'all later. Bye.
Bye.